to turn, listen, when a watch movement turns this crunchy, the teeth on these gears are brand new.
John Mayer, 5 years later, from the original Talking Watches.
How many Talking Watches have you done so far?
We have done 45 episodes of Talking Watches, and you were the first.
Wow.
And little did we know that it would become what it is today. I mean, now it's really our flagship property, I would say.
Great.
And we shot that video in a cafe in New York City on a day that you were in town, I think to do Letterman or something like that.
That's right.
And really no thought given to it, and now here we are.
Yeah, and since then it's become a little bit more understood, the sort of notion of showing your watches off.
Yeah.
Being more of a historical-based, sort of passion-based thing, and not like, hey, look what I got. You know, it's not really supposed to be like a flex, as the kids call it. It's cool to see people accept someone showing off their collection as more than just showing off.
Showing wealth.
Showing wealth.
And a lot of these watches that we'll see today, you've had for a long time. I mean, even longer than Hodinkee's been around.
Yeah, longer than 10 years. And I think that's important to point out, that the value, or whatever people say, of some of these watches would make them prohibitive for me to own all these now.
And so we have a lot of Daytonas here.
Yes.
So the Daytona is a big part of what you do, what you love. Should we go through a few?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't we start with this guy here?
This is a 6265, so fairly later on into the lifespan of the Daytona. Mm-hmm. And of course there is a burning, passionate love for Arab branded dial.
Indeed.
Rolex, especially Daytona. And this has the Omani Khanjar, I believe they call it. Mm-hmm. And it's in the 6 subdial. It's green. It's kind of pot leafy. There's something about it from afar. It's a little pot leafy, is it not?
I could see that. I could definitely see that.
We're talking about red, silver, and black.
Yep.
And then this striking contrast of green. I think that's what really draws me. It really does interrupt the design in a way that's exciting to me, you know. And you could say the same for this. Is another 6265 with a.
It doesn't say Rolex anywhere on the dial.
It doesn't say Rolex anywhere on it. I mean, how much do you think of your brand to go, hey, get that Rolex brand off there?
Which is something that just would never happen today.
It would never happen today. So it represents somebody doing a custom order with Rolex.
Yeah.
And we've seen history dictate that that's happened, but it really doesn't happen very often anymore.
It almost never happens anymore. But I mean, even this was for, you know, royal family members. This was not like just a wealthy guy doing this, you know? And how long have you had these two watches?
10 years, about 10 years. And they were in a trade. There were 3 Arab dial sport Rolexes in a trade.
For what?
For one Patek 5004. A white gold baton, you know, a very good version of a 5004. But did pretty well in that one.
And what is this guy?
So, as we're seeing Paul Newman Daytonas become astronomically high in value, I'm looking towards no-nonsense, non-Paul Newman Daytonas. And they really, I think, to me, are taking the place of what Paul Newman Daytonas were, but now to wear one outside of the house is kind of crazy.
It is, yeah.
And there's a jeans and t-shirt quotient to this watch. Mm-hmm. There's also a unisex quality to it.
Yep.
And this reminds me of an era that I was dreaming of making it in. So I was a kid dreaming of making it when these watches were in catalogs. We all want to make it in the year in which we most dreamed of it.
Totally.
And by simple virtue of time, you don't get a chance to do that. You end up, if you're lucky, making it, but years after you first had that aesthetic in your mind of what it was going to be like. Yeah. And these watches remind me of what it must have been like to have a brand new gold Rolex in 1985. And that would have been what time it was around, 84, 85. Mm-hmm. And you have a little piece of where you would have been if you really did make it when you were 9.
And this is a 6264.
6264. You could call it a Panda dial except for the red Daytona.
Right.
Right? But you could get away with calling it a Panda dial. There's something about the intersection of pump pusher, Panda-esque, Paul Newman, not an oyster, basically a 6241 dial, in one of these really strange transitional reference numbers.
For like, yeah, made for 1 year, like 1972, and that's it.
Yeah, so if you're one of these collectors who likes a bunch of little asterisks next to the thing, well, you could have a 6239, or you could have a 6241, but you start getting into these little...
This is that third tier.
This is that third tier of things. Like, well, no, this is a 6264, also serviced, and super clean, too.
Yeah.
And if we're going to stay in 6264s, you got this guy as well, which trades being a Paul Newman for being something some might say is far more interesting.
And what is it?
It is a pulsation dial on the outer track used theoretically by doctors to measure beats per minute of someone's heart. It's not hard to imagine the lifestyle of the person who wore the watch. Right. This was a doctor who must have been a watch collector and must have said, hey, I want a Daytona with a pulsation dial.
Totally. There are probably less than 10 of these that are verified as real known. And it actually really is interesting because every other Daytona was made at scale, right? I mean, even the Paul Newmans that were made in the thousands. They had a template, they would just kind of stamp them out. There's a few different variations of them, and we see like 2 or 3 of these, and that's it, of each variation. So this is a really special Daytona, and it doesn't look like much from afar. It looks like a normal 6241.
You couldn't tell.
But I mean, this is more valuable to most than an oyster Paul Newman.
For my money, it's just one of the most interesting, novel, quirky, and also aesthetically beautiful Daytonas that there are.
Yeah, and as I said, it's really in the upper echelons of Daytona collecting. And you have some other vintage Daytonas here that really are kind of the benchmark for collectible Daytonas.
Yeah, they're the, I didn't know it at the time really, but they have become the cornerstone of a collection. I mean, I can't lie, it's been amazing to watch the numbers go up on them. Remember, I was buying watches and trying to impress upon people around me that I promise I'm not crazy, right?
Sure.
So I would, email a business manager and be like, can you please, I promise you this is important, can you please just, can we get this? And it's like a business manager, for those who don't know, is a dad that you hire to ask for money, right? So for me, when I see that something has gone exponentially higher than what I paid for it, my first thought is, oh, people aren't going to think I was crazy for spending that much money in the first place.
Right. So we're talking about the 6269 and the 6270. These are the original rainbow Daytonas.
These are the original rainbows. Certainly, this is the original baguette pave dial Daytona. There is differing takes on how many there were made of these. I've heard 8.
Right.
What have you heard?
So for the longest time, I heard 8. Then I heard 10. Then I heard 8 again. So nobody has any idea.
Between 8 and 10. And I have to tell you, this must have sat in a safe, because to turn, when a watch movement turns this crunchy, the teeth on these gears are brand new.
And these are really the rarest of the rare manually wound Daytonas. And to see the 6269 and the 6270 next to each other is not something you see often.
No, the 6269 is the princess cut diamond bezel version. I think all would agree. Well, maybe you would say that the 6270 is a his and the 69 is a hers.
Yep.
And that's dreaming about a life I certainly don't have, but man, would that be fun.
Which is a great segue into the actual rainbow Daytona, which you wear all the time.
I don't quite know who the target audience is if you're just looking at the aesthetic. You could imagine, but there is something about them that when people see in person, they all kind of give in and go, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it. And when these first came out, everybody thought they were too much. The attitude on a Rainbow Daytona when they first came out was yuck. Who would do that? Who would go so far? And something happened that's brilliant, where the joy of collecting superseded the craziness of the design of these watches. And I remember referencing Jay Leno. Jay Leno is a real inspiration as a collector to me, because we used to go to Tonight Show performances, and Jay Leno's parking spot would have a different vehicle in it every day. And sometimes it would be like a 1920s fire truck.
Right.
And you started to learn after year after year after year that Jay Leno could drive anything he wanted, and it would make sense because he was such an enthusiast. And I do believe that if you are a big enough enthusiast of Rolex, that you can understand the rarity of the piece and also the rarity of the thought behind creating the piece.
Absolutely.
You can then wear the watch as a collector more than someone who goes, I just believe I'm the guy who should be wearing an entire gradient circle of sapphires.
Yeah.
I think that's me. I see a lot of myself in diamond set lugs. You don't. You keep the story the way it is and you wear it for several reasons. And then after wearing it for a while, you go, I actually kind of like it.
And you've got two modern Daytonas here that you think could be something special down the road.
Yes. So I really enjoy finding what I call sleeper hits. Watches that are released, same as anything else, but are usually eclipsed by a higher demand for a watch next to it. And I look at it and I go, did you guys not notice this just came out?
Yeah.
And I get them for that reason. The same year, I believe it was 2016, that the ceramic bezel Daytona comes out. Rolex releases a white gold and a yellow gold Daytona with a blue and green dial, respectively. Any other year before, if we had found out that Rolex was going to put out on an all-metal watch, a colored dial, I just went, how does nobody notice this? And I bought this from a dealer.
From an authorized dealer.
From an authorized dealer. And he sent it to me and he said, well, you're pretty crazy because I just found out that we can't get another one of these for a really long time and people kind of want it. And I went, yeah, I know. I enjoy looking past the hype and going, wait a minute, that is empirically really special.
Yeah,
so
it's objectively rare.
Yes. So I believe if you're out there and you care about what my picks are, the green dial gold Daytona is still out there, still floating around, and it's the future thing that I think people are going to go, why didn't we know? Because look, if we're constantly looking back, going, why didn't we know? There have to be future iterations of why didn't we know that we can act on now. And the same thing, maybe to a slightly lesser degree, but it's a midnight blue, full white gold. Except everybody goes so wild
For the ceramic.
for the ceramic Daytona that they miss that, wait a minute, the real Holy Grail, the real cup of a carpenter, are these, it's an Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade reference. Then the dealer said to me, he looked up at me, and he was an old guy, he looked up at me, and he said, you have chosen wisely. And people over 40 will love that.
So let's finish off the Rolexes. We've got a few subs actually.
Yes, I'm a big collector of Comex Submariner and Sea Dwellers.
In the last video you showed a 1680 Comex.
Yes, which I still love, has a great story behind it. Well, the original Comex is what's called a 5514 reference, and that would be the prototype to the Sea Dweller. And that would be a Submariner with a helium gas escape valve. Why do I love that so much? Because it would be really hard to fake it. It'd be really hard to take a 5513, install your own helium escape valve, you know those garage helium escape valve jobs, and stamp it Comex on the back. And so that is the perfect example of a Comex, which is Comex, a French diving team, needs a watch that can saturation dive deeper than a Submariner. And so this is Rolex's initial answer, which is, well, here's a Submariner that we think solves the problem.
And this one looks just like a normal 5513. Great faded bezel. It's a perfect dive watch.
It's a perfect dive watch, and it's a perfect added value watch if you enjoy, like I do, the sort of diamonds on the inside thing. To quote a Ben Harper lyric that I've always remembered, it's like these little tiny elements that help you realize it looks basic, but it's not basic. If you want to go back all the way to the very beginning, to what, 1953?
Yeah, 53, 54.
So there's your very first Submariner before they called it a Submariner.
Right, so it doesn't even say Submariner on the
Doesn't
dial.
even say Submariner. What do you have? You have a no crown guard, big crown.
Big crown, Explorer dial.
369. This would be the very, very first Rolex dive watch.
Yeah, no hash marks on the bezel.
So this is like a 54 Fender Stratocaster to me. This is the watch that birthed, in a lot of ways, every other dive watch you've seen since.
So a lot of these watches, a lot of the vintage Rolexes you've had for a long time, 10 years plus. And then you transition kind of quickly into Patek Philippe. And so when I think of you and when I first got to know you, Patek Philippe was what you were all about.
Yes.
And I think the first time I met you, you were wearing this watch, which I still think of as one of your watches.
It is one of my favorite pieces.
5971.
5971. This is the very end of the Lemania base plate movement era of Patek Philippe. And as we get to know their thinking a little more, we realize in the way that the 5960 coming out in platinum first was their way of celebrating their new in-house movement. This to me is graduation day for Lemania movement era perpetuals from Patek. When you see it in pictures, you might say that's just a watch with diamonds around it. When you see it in person, it all adds up and makes perfect sense. You know, remember, the 5970, like the 3970, has these American Courier typewriter font numbers that I love. I love the American Courier typewriter font on a perpetual. It is 80s banker Wolf of Wall Street nonsense.
Yes, it really is.
And I really love it. I don't know about the lifestyle, but I think the aesthetic is really cool.
So similar to the 5971, the 5004 plays a big part in your collection. You've got a bunch of them, you love it.
The power of the 5004 lies in how big the crown is with a pusher in the middle of the crown. It is stunning. When you show somebody the split-second timer function, whether you're into watches or not, they go, wow, that's cool.
It's a neat thing.
4 different metals in 3 or 4 different dials. Maybe
5 different metals, if you count the steel.
if you count the steel. 6 if you count the titanium sold at the one watch. You don't want to
That's
try
a
to
deep
go,
cut. That's a deep cut.
You know. But right, it is 5 metals. This is new for me on Talking Watches because I'm showing a piece unique that was made for me by Patek. And this was made 2012. This is a salmon dial 5004 with my name engraved on the back.
At the factory.
At the factory.
Yeah.
I decided to go with Mr. J.C. Mayer. I felt that was very much in the Patek style. It's also, again, I am not Mr. J.C. Mayer, but in the fantasy of the man I am when I wear these watches, I am Mr. J.C. Mayer. Nowhere else in my life am I Mr. J.C. Mayer. And the most interesting part about the watch is that I requested luminous hands. And I said, I would like to be able to see the watch on stage in the dark. I'd like to be able to read the time in the dark. And
Which is completely reasonable.
It's completely reasonable, and they agreed to it. And so I believe I have the only 5004 with luminous hands.
Yeah. And how many times have you worn that on stage?
Yeah, 0 times. But I thought the request, well, also it's a you sweat right through one of these bands. You want to get a stinky band. You wear these on stage. And I probably will wear it one night when I'm playing real close to home. This doesn't travel on the bus, people. Driver carries no more than $20 in change. And so this is the first time I've shown off a piece unique. I don't necessarily make a habit of opening up that part of the story, but I kind of feel like if everyone is showing off these pieces they have, why not just one up them? And they go, well, we're into piece unique stuff now. Where there's just not another one.
Yeah.
I also want to say this: you don't see leather straps on the hip hop guys or actors or musicians. So you see Nautilus, you see basically Nautilus, But once you cross that barrier into leather straps, and I think a lot of people don't see themselves as being a leather strap person, and that's more to my point of like, yeah, I'm not either, but that's why wearing it is taking a jump into another lifestyle to wear it. But I just saw Post Malone with one. I was in the studio with Travis Scott at a 5131 World Time.
No kidding.
And so people are starting to go there. Kevin Hart. So that's really interesting to start moving into there. It doesn't get serious until it has leather on it,
Or in this case, rubber.
Or rubber.
Right.
And that sort of takes us into the watches I've worn the most over the last 5 years. AP, about 10 years ago, put out their first concept. And since then, I've sort of been releasing these watches that are hyper technical. They get their power from being a little different. And the watch I've worn the most, one of the watches I've worn the most, is the white ceramic GMT. It's the perfect summer watch. That watch has been in my wrist more times on stage with Dead & Company probably than any other watch. It's light, but it's big.
Yeah.
And much like this one, which is the latest purchase I've made of AP, which is the self-winding tourbillon, AP right now is on it with these watches. Much in the way that Richard Mille is, but with like 100 years behind it. And for whatever reason, we buy watches to kind of get kicked in the crotch in a certain way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You go, oof. You know, you buy something, you go, oof. But you're kind of buying the thrill of going, oof, look at this. How am I going to explain this? Yeah. And I got to say, whatever that original buzz is when you first get the watch, when it comes to AP technical pieces, never goes away. I've had that for a couple of years, 3 years almost now.
Yeah.
I could still put it on and go out and feel like I just got it. Nothing that it offers you melts away over time.
Yeah. I also just love the idea of you wearing this watch on stage with the Grateful Dead. That's like a completely absurd thing.
It's funny you would mention that. So the first thought would be, well, you're so different. How could you do that? And the other one is, well, Grateful Dead was so different from everyone else around them.
Yeah.
So you're keeping up at least with the concept of being yourself and being different. So that would be like me, you know? We're only looking to become more truthful versions of ourselves.
Sure. And you have a manually wound tourbillon as well.
This is one of the most worn watches as well. This is what I think is the boutique exclusive version of the extra thin tourbillon in gold with a matching gold dial. Remember, I love a tourbillon because it is a bunch of technology to be a wall clock. Right. It does nothing more than tell you the hours and the minutes, but the process to that is so Rube Goldberg device.
It really is.
I love it. It is so, it's like Flintstones. Remember like the Flintstones, like the remote control would be you press a button and the bird has to go to the TV and change. Like, there is all this mousetrap stuff happening, just so the most simple aspect of time telling can take place. And I believe AP's rose gold mix is the finest rose gold color of all the manufacturers. I just do.
You wear all the APs all the time. What else do you wear often?
Well, let's tell the story of the day you and I both met at the Rolex boutique in New York City,
Yeah.
had a couple drinks,
Yeah, we did.
and walked into the Rolex boutique and both bought ourselves the white gold GMT. Of course, everyone knows, I think a GMT is just the greatest. I think in some ways it's kind of cooler than a Daytona. Application-wise, a GMT is so exciting. It's world ready. It's like, let's go.
Yeah, it really is.
And I decided to have the back engraved with a Grateful Dead Steal Your Face Steely on the back.
That's sweet.
I've been in the band long enough now that I can kind of admit that it was always a little secret talisman on my wrist, a little good luck to myself.
Sure.
Like, a little don't screw this up, you know? It was
awesome.
engraved upside down. A lot of engravers, when they engrave the back of a watch, believe that the crown being on the right would be the back of the watch, but that means the watch is upside down. How perfectly Grateful Dead is that? It's upside down, man, and that's just fine.
And then another watch you wear all the time is the one on your wrist.
Yeah.
Which we've actually seen before.
Yeah, you know, I didn't know it at the time. 5164A, travel time, Patek Philippe Aquanaut.
Tiffany sign.
Tiffany sign.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to wear the sort of Chuck Taylor version of Patek Philippe. And so this has become, for me, the watch you wear when you just want to wear a watch. Mm-hmm. And you don't always want to make a statement. And this has become kind of my go-to piece, you know? It doesn't throw anybody off, but it's still a Patek. It is a GMT. So this is the watch that you'd wear to symbolize that you got some other pieces at home, but that this is the one you're wearing out. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted to cheat, you'd just go buy this one. Wouldn't you think that someone wearing a 5164A also has some other heavy hitters at home?
And everybody I know that has that watch has heavy hitters at home.
So look, if you just want to jump the line when you're watching this, get a 5164A. It's all you need, and everyone else will look at you and go like, you got some other pieces at home.
That guy gets it.
You're just being demure tonight. And I must tell you, I switched the strap out to a green about a year and a half ago, and then found out that Patek was going to discontinue these green rubber straps. You can call your AD any day and go, hey, can you order me the green rubber straps?
Yeah.
Well, they stopped, and now I'm reading that the green rubber OEM, original equipment manufacturer Patek straps are going for a pretty penny.
They sure are.
So I just also wanted to show off. I'm the only person showing off straps on a talking watches. In 45 talking watches, no one has ever shown off their straps. These are two uncut, unused, what they call camo green, which is strange because it's not camo. This is sort of an olive drab green, in fact.
And so what do you think of all the younger guys that are getting into watches now in Hollywood and hip hop and all that?
I think it's great. I think with so many things that people do that are the same, we get the same iPhone. We get the same sneakers. Everything is a little bit rank and file. And I think that we're entering a period of culture where people want to individualize. Everyone gets handed an Instagram account. Here is your standard issue phone. Here are the things you like, and here are the politics you're for. And these watches are a way for people to break out of that just a little bit and go, well, here's the kind of person I am. And me wearing a hulking 46 millimeter titanium concept watch is a way of me sometimes saying, well, here's what I'm into. And that can be evidenced by looking at these Instagram pages devoted to what celebrities are wearing now. Yeah. They tell us something about that. Seeing Mark Wahlberg wear like a 5719 Nautilus, but it's probably not a 5719 because it's got the big jumbo baguettes all over it. Yeah. So a Nautilus covered in baguettes tells me something I didn't know about him. Yeah. And it's not positive or negative, but I go, oh. Or you see Tyga wearing a rose gold rainbow. You go, oh, he knows. Yeah. It's a way of informing people in one other way that's not just the standard issue, yay to this, nay to that. And you just are meant in life to follow that little whisper inside you of enthusiasm. And I just can't stress enough, it's not about having money or not having money. It's about listening to that little whisper inside you of enthusiasm. What are you truly enthusiastic about? I, right now, am enthusiastic about collecting clothes. People look at me and think I'm crazy the same way they looked at me when they thought I was crazy for collecting watches. Because I have a little whisper of enthusiasm that says Visvim robes are hugely important pieces of art. These are little chambers for our curiosity and the thought energy we have. I have thousands of thoughts a day, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. And this is a place to put all that energy that can create this harmonious feeling in your life. For me, you get to pick which watch to put on. Doesn't have to be an AP concept, but if you've got your dress one and your sport one and the one that made your stomach hurt when you bought it, no matter what bracket it was in, you've got a collection, you know? This represents a time in my life. This is all the drugs I never did. This is all the drugs I never did, man. That's what I told myself at the time. Living alone, didn't have a house, touring, you know. And I think, you know, like, there are some guys right now doing that same thing. Mm-hmm. You know, Sheeran's cleaning up.
I'll say.
He has no dependents. He claims no dependents on his taxes. There's a time in your 20s, God, I was so lucky, and only now am I making up for the gratitude I was not in my right mind to have at the time. If you're lucky enough to go on a run like that in your 20s, and most of the time a guy in rock music can't point to any of the money he made in his 20s and 30s. Sure. And I can point to it, you know. And now they're like, now they're going crazy, and I look at it and I go, well, that's cool, but I don't want the money. I want the watches. Right. That's how I'm sure that I'm a collector.